Good afternoon, everybody. So this webinar on pharmacovigilance is being conducted today as part of Pharmacovigilance Week, which was celebrated all over India from 17th to 23rd of last month, that is September. And this program was supposed to happen a few days ago, but due to certain unavoidable circumstances, it got postponed. And I'm happy that it is happening today. Now, what is this pharmacovigilance? Pharmacovigilance is the science and the activity that is related to the detection, assessment, understanding, and prevention of adverse effects of medicines or the drugs. So always we keep you telling, whenever you take a drug, you are actually taking a risk, is it not? So keep that in mind, and whenever you administer a drug, keep that in mind. It can produce any sort of adverse effect. But then why this pharmacovigilance? Actually, the tragedy of thalidomide in the 1960s compelled the health agencies and regulators to deliberate on the drug safety issues. So actually what happened was thousands of babies were born without the limbs because of administration of a drug called as thalidomide to pregnant women for morning sickness. And I think you all have seen that photograph in your books. So that was called a sealed limb, or babies born without limbs. So that actually led to this particular idea of monitoring system somewhere late in the 1960s. Initially there were 10 countries who joined for this purpose, and later on, somewhere in 1978, the WHO took over it and established a centralized drug monitoring center at Uppsala, that is in Sweden, in 1978. And at present, there are more than 150 countries as members of this particular center, and India also is one amongst them, which joined in 1998. Now, the main aims of the pharmacovigilance are, it is to improve the patient care and safety. That is the first and foremost aim of this pharmacovigilance program, to improve the safety of patients, patient care as well as safety, to improve the public health safety as well, and also to contribute to the assessment of benefit as well as harm or effectiveness and risk of medications, and lastly to promote the understanding, the clinical training and the effective communication to both health professionals and public at large. Thus, in order to prevent unnecessary suffering by patients and to decrease the financial loss sustained by the patients due to inappropriate or unsafe use of medicines, it is very essential that a monitoring system for the safety of medicines is supported by all the doctors, pharmacists, nurses, and other healthcare professionals. So to tell about this and more, we have Dr. Shivamurthy as a guest speaker today. At the outset, I welcome him. Welcome, Dr. Shivamurthy. For today's webinar, hello. Yeah, I once again welcome you, Dr. Shivamurthy, for this webinar on pharmacovigilance, and thank you so much for accepting our invitation. Not only that, Dr. Shivamurthy got, it's a very good achievement actually, so I would like to share with you. He got the first place in the Pharmacovigilance Week that was conducted at the national level for his animation movie on ADRs, wherein all over the country the participants were there, and he was awarded the first place. So congratulations to Dr. Shivamurthy for that achievement, and I think we should give him a big round of applause for that. Now, before we hand over mic to you, sir, I think Dr. Satyanarayana will briefly tell you about him.
Good afternoon, everyone. And good afternoon to our guest speaker, Shivamurthy. So it's my privilege to introduce today's speaker, Shivamurthy. He has, in fact, I'm also happy to tell that he was my colleague at Vijayanagar Institute of Medical Science, Ballari, during the period 1998 to 2001. We were colleagues during our post-graduation period. So there is so much to tell, but I'll try to keep it very brief. Shivamurthy passed MD Pharmacology in year 2001 by securing first rank in the university. And not only MD, he has also, other than that, he has finished his masters in business management. He has put up a lot of experience in both academics and industry. In industry itself, he has worked around 21 years, putting his experience in various clinical operations, that is clinical trials, right from phase 1 to phase 4 clinical trials, pharmacovigilance, and regulatory and quality management. He has worked in many reputed companies like, to name a few, Novo Nordisk, Lotus Lab, then Jubilant Life Sciences, what is in clinical research, Fortis Clinical Research, Northrox Research, Semler Research, etc. In coming to academics, he has worked in prestigious institutions like St. John's Medical College, Bangalore, then Mahatma Gandhi Medical College at Pondicherry, then Wayanad Institute of Medical Science in Kerala, and presently is working as associate professor at Chandrama Dayanand Sagar Institute of Medical Research at Bangalore. Other than academics, Shivamurthy has a lot of interest in social and professional development activities. He is the founder president of Medical Pharmacological Society, and he is a life member for Indian Pharmacology Society. He has been a reviewer in IJP. It's one of the prestigious journal in pharmacology, Indian Journal of Pharmacology. He is a reviewer. He worked as an advisory board member in Clinical Trial Magnifier, an online journal in University of Hong Kong. Other than this, academics also he has done a lot of publications and his projects has got awards at various regulatory and scientific bodies. There are many, I just don't want to go into all the publication awards. Just sir told that one recently the prize what sir has got just 2 weeks back. Okay. Then other than that, now presently that Vijay Karnataka TV channel has given appreciation letter for a short movie in the contest season 3. With this, I hand over today's session to Dr. Shivamurthy and I welcome you, sir.
Thank you very much for all the intelligent question. With this, I will start my presentation.
We can hear you.
Can you see my presentation?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Oh, okay. So, first of all, good afternoon to everyone. Good afternoon, students. I would like to thank management of Rajarajeshwari Medical College and Hospital and Professor and HOD Dr. Basuraj Bandari sir and my friend Dr. Satyanarayana, Department of Pharmacology, for inviting me to this important program. I have a lot of information to share today, so I don't want to waste any time. I would like to directly jump into my topic. Today's topic is pharmacovigilance, the science of adverse drug reaction, with the main objective to cover the workshop on adverse drug reaction form completion. My talk is structured with background discussion on importance of pharmacovigilance, brief discussion on drug development process, some important definitions in pharmacovigilance, different types of reports generated in pharmacovigilance, and method to complete the ADR form with the help of a case scenario. I will also cover a little bit about causality assessment method towards the end, and also I'll relate this with the case we are going to solve. So to start with, I would like to introduce the topic with some examples of important adverse drug reactions as given in the picture. Phenytoin produces hypertrophy of gums. Also, it can cause congenital anomalies like spina bifida and others. These are serious adverse events. Sulfur drugs produces very severe adverse events such as Stevens-Johnson syndrome, bullous epidermal necrolysis. Sometimes it can also lead to death. Tetracyclines are contraindicated in children, as you already know. Reason is it can cause permanent discoloration of teeth and also bone deformities. So as Dr. Bhandari sir introduced the topic, you already know that there was a drug called thalidomide, which was developed in 1950s by the West German pharmaceutical company, intended to be used as sedative or tranquilizer. But soon after it was launched, it was prescribed for treating colds, flu, nausea, morning sickness in pregnant women and others. At animal testing, it was found that company would not estimate the lethal dose. It means that it is considered to be one of the safest drugs. Drug was seen to be harmless to humans. It was launched in 1956. It was traded in more than 46 countries in more than 37 different brandings. United Kingdom's Distillers Company launched with an advertisement to use this drug in pregnant mothers and nursing mothers and even children. One day, suddenly, Australian doctor, Dr. William McBride, reported to Lancet in 1961 in a letter to editor and published about pecomelia. Later, it was detected that more than 20,000 babies were affected by this drug worldwide. Around 50% of these babies could not see their first birthday. Huge amount of compensations were paid by the companies in their respective regions. So another story to this is that it is not the end of the thalidomide, even though it was so deleterious for the new babies. But later, research continued. As you all know, all drugs are poisons in one or the other way. After knowing its deleterious effects, it was found that thalidomide can be used in conditions such as multiple myeloma, erythema nodosum leprosum, leprosy for reducing inflammation and stopping graft versus host reactions. So it's like one drug which is ineffective or deleterious or dangerous for one condition, it doesn't mean that it is out. So it can be processed in the another way. Till now, we discussed about the adverse drug reactions due to innate properties of the drug itself. Now, let us try to understand the other aspects also, which are responsible for adverse drug reactions. Quickly, let us go to the one small video, 1 minute video. I would like your attention on this. After that, we will continue our discussion.
Hi Dr. David sir.
Hi Mr. Vickers.
My sister took your consultation yesterday.
Yes, Jessica met me yesterday. How is she now?
Doctor, my sister had a fall in the morning. She took her medicine for hypertension yesterday night.
Oh, I wrote in prescription and instructed pharmacist to inform patient to sit on bed for 5 to 10 minutes before standing. Antihypertensives may cause orthostatic hypertension after initiating treatment.
Is it doctor? I also read your prescription, but I was not able to read your handwriting.
Oh, is it? I am changing to printing of my prescription. I will ensure no patient will experience such issue.
Wow. Great doctor. Thank you.
So now let me continue my discussion. So as you saw in the video, adverse drug reactions not only happens due to innate properties of the drug, they can also result due to inappropriate use of the drug. In this video, adverse events resulted due to deficiencies in communication gap between the doctor, patient and pharmacist, inappropriate handwriting by the doctor. So you also understood that through pharmacovigilance, you can do the systematic audit of your system or the processes followed at your hospital. If any deficiencies are identified, corrections can be easily done. In this case, doctor decided to give more importance to communication aspects and decided to print the prescription. It was difficult to read the handwriting of the doctor. So even though doctor wrote the instructions, patient was not able to understand what the doctor has written. By changing the prescription to printing, it clarifies to the patient and to the pharmacist that what is the exact method of intake of the drug, and it corrected the systematic error that happened in the system. Now, I would like to ask you, can you name any one drug which is completely safe? I don't think you will find any one. I believe no such drug can exist on this earth. If you drink excess of water, you will have diuresis. If you eat more food, you will have obesity. When food and water is not safe to eat and drink, we cannot expect any other drug to be safe. So no medicinal product is entirely safe and absolutely safe for all people in all places and at all times. We must always live with some level of uncertainty. So naturalnews.com published a poster. If we doctors throw away all our medicines into sea, it would be that much better for our patients and that much worse for the fishes living in the sea. You can imagine the damage we are doing by overuse of medicines. So we need to be very careful about use of the drug. So now let us get into the topic. What is pharmacovigilance? It is the science and activities related to detection, assessment, understanding, and prevention of adverse effects or any other possible drug-related problem. As given in the picture, you can see pharmacovigilance involves pharmaceutical companies, doctors, nurses, technicians, patients, regulators, medical representatives, general public. Consumers are the most important stakeholders in this process. If you stand in front of a pharmacy, okay, when we purchase any small machine, we expect warranty for that product. Do we expect the same warranty after purchasing a medicine? Yes or no? I don't think we expect so much of security for ourselves. If you stand in front of a pharmacy for some time, you will see that many people will be going and requesting the pharmacist to issue drugs without prescription. In a medical college hospital, it may not happen because it is already under scrutiny. But if you go out and see a pharmacy, I'm not sure whether a qualified pharmacist is available in these shops or not. I don't think he knows anything about regulations or not even bothered to know about the consequences of issuing drugs without prescription. If that is the case, I'm sure patients are not bothered about warranty. Drugs are double-edged sword. Either it can help us if used properly or kill us if not used properly. Public not even know about the availability of Pharmacovigilance Program of India. It is important to bring awareness about this program so that we can encourage them to report adverse drug reactions and help us to find out the risky drugs and eliminate them from the market. So what are the type of drugs covered in pharmacovigilance activity? So all types of drugs and therapeutics are covered under the pharmacovigilance activity. Pharmaceuticals, herbals, biologicals, Ayush medications, traditional medications, complementary medications are also covered. There is something called as hemovigilance. This hemovigilance is mainly, as the name itself indicates, it covers the vigilance against blood products. There is a one more new program called as Materiovigilance. It covers the medical devices. You may be wondering what are these medical devices. You may be also aware that so many medical devices including CT scan and MRI, like this, if you take so many medications, so many instruments are used for the purpose of treating the patients. And if you go to ICU, you will be seeing a lot of machines in and around. So monitoring of all these materials is considered as the material vigilance. Okay, so these are the, like, it even covers the softwares that are used in the therapeutic purposes. There is something called as vaccines pharmacovigilance, which is going to gain more importance in the near future. It is slowly growing. There is a separate method of assessment of drugs related to vaccination. It is called as AEFI, adverse event following immunization. So you may be wondering, why should we do pharmacovigilance? Drug is already tested sufficiently before releasing it to the market. More than 10 years are spent while testing the drugs. So what are they doing? And they are spending more than 5,000 to 10,000 crores of money, crores of rupees of money in developing such drugs. More than 10,000 molecules are screened before finding a suitable lead and getting into the market. After having so many steps and guards like regulatory authorities, approvals, before marketing, so why do we need again intense, why do we need to invest money on this and time on this pharmacovigilance in post-marketing phase? So this is the question which is always wondering us, but definitely there is a reason for it. As you know that whenever we develop a product, we develop with the lot of limitations. We all work with limitations. As you know, drugs are tested in limited population, in a limited setup, with limited inclusion-exclusion criteria, and with limited budget, for a limited period of time, with so many other limitations. All the clinical trial results are not completely generalizable. Then then what are we doing in this? Then are they waste? Definitely not. Clinical trials are the only way we can find the drugs fastest way into the market. So clinical trials are not waste. Clinical trials help us to find suitable drugs in a suitable condition that was set. Okay, so we have a controlled condition in that we test the drugs and we find that they are suitable or not. Now, let us see how drugs are developed in a brief way. You can see in the picture that drugs are identified through historical use or computational method or random synthesis. Sometimes toxic effects of the fruits, plants, roots, or useful effects of these plants, fruits, and roots may help us to identify the active principles. Once identified, lab testing and characterization of the molecule is done, and investigational new drug status is obtained. It is called as IND. Simultaneously, there will be an application for patenting and also for the purpose of evaluation in the further evaluation. Once the pharma company receives the patent and regulatory status, that is IND status, they will start the evaluation in animals. Okay, at least more than one species of rodents and other primates are used for the purpose of testing, and once it is found that all the toxicological effects, pharmacokinetic, pharmacodynamic effects are confirmed, then they will apply for a new chemical entity status. Once that status is granted, then it will get into the clinical trial, that is the first-in-man phase 1 trials. There the main objective is to do the pharmacokinetic trials in healthy volunteers. Sometimes we may involve the patients if the patients are like anti-cancer drugs or something like that. Otherwise, we may directly go for the healthy volunteers. In this phase 1, we may also do evaluate on the some of the pharmacokinetic parameters simultaneously, like heart rate, effect on heart rate, blood pressure, blood flow, and on the various organs. All these things, and also some of the safety aspects are also like evaluated for the frequency, organ system classification, all this. If found okay, next phase of clinical trials, that is the phase 2, will begin. In this, generally a small group of at least 100 to 200 patients who are like for which the indication is targeted. Those kind of patients are enrolled, and pharmacodynamic and safety and efficacy testing is done in these trials. If found to be promising, then randomized double-blind multicentric trials are planned and conducted simultaneously. This trial is conducted in a multinational, multicentric manner, so that more number of ethnic groups of patients are included. And if found okay, then the drug application is filed for the purpose of for the purpose of releasing into the market. Once the phase 3 is completed, and there will be a lot of once they file the application, there will be a lot of committees they will sit and review all these documents and evaluate it. And if found to be okay, then it will be allowed, marketing authorization is issued and allowed to market. Once the product is available in the market, it will be a new drug for 4 years in India, and all the pharmaceutical companies are mandated to give the safety report every 6 months for the first 2 years, and once annually for next 2 years. So totally around 6 reports will go to the regulators to ensure that the drug is under controlled manner, and it's also a part of the pharmacovigilance also. So these reports should include data gathered so far and provide update on all the safety information collected so far in a structured report format. So this slide just shows the various phases. Like in phase 1, healthy volunteers, 20 to 200 patients are healthy volunteers are involved, and phase 2, 200 to 300 patients are involved, and phase 3, 300 to 3,000 patients are involved, and then the marketing authorization is obtained. After that, phase 4, that's the post-marketing surveillance continues. Then what are the limitations of now? You saw that so much of evaluations happens. Then we need to understand what are the limitations of preclinical phase of the drug evaluation. Whatever we do in all the stages of clinical trials or preclinical stages, the data is applicable in a limited way only. As given in the slide, the data generated may not be completely reliable, maybe due to genetic makeup and in the differences in the pharmacokinetic and dynamic parameters. These differences impact on the final clinical results. If you see here, penicillin is, as all of us know, except it is having only the type 1 hypersensitive reaction, that is the most important adverse event. Otherwise, it's one of the safest drug on this earth, and I have taken this drug so many times, and even I have given to administer to so many patients. But it is when we evaluated in preclinical primates, it is found that in guinea pig it was a toxic one, and so if you would have relied completely on this, then you would have lost a very important drug. Similarly, aspirin, again, it was toxic to cats, and as you know, it's already more than 125 years in the market, and it is market sales are continuously improving and growing. And actually, when it was used in larger quantity, that is the 1 to 2 grams or 5 grams, then it was causing a lot of gastritis. But otherwise, Otherwise, it was a good one. And later, like when they found that it bounced back with a with a small lower dose aspirin, which is nowadays completely it is so much of so many kgs or tons of aspirin is used in treating cardiovascular accidents or preventing the cardiovascular accidents. If you now believed as cats results in cats, you would have lost an important drug. Similarly, like it is found that HIV vaccine is completely effective in chimpanzees, but in humans it is the reverse of it. So like this, there are definitely variations what we can see, and there are as discussed already, that development is done in limited setting, in limited standardized population. The results of these trials are not completely generalizable in all types of population, especially children and elderly patients will pose different challenges. In clinical trials, adverse events may be reported more frequently due to the apprehension and anxiety. Patients, anxious, and they come back repeatedly and say that I am suffering from this. General population may not be aware of these adverse events profile at all when the drug is coming into the market, and these may be ignored by the general population. So it is completely a reverse scenario of what you see once the drug is there in the market. Most of appealing drugs like celecoxib, rofecoxib were banned for regular use due to their cardiovascular accidents and other adverse events. And as you see, nimesulide was banned in all the other countries, most of the countries, but in India we are still using in adults. So tarpenadine, they were very much promising when we were students, and they were immediately banned because of the cardiac adverse events. So what are the other limitations? Limitations of the trials, again, reproductive age, reproductive age to females are not included into the trials. Their participation is not at all approved by the ethics committee. If patients with coexisting diseases, usually they will be coming under the exclusion criteria when we are doing clinical trials. So then generally these clinical trials, definitely they will not include the patients whom we definitely intended to treat. Those patients who are at risk, generally they are eliminated from participation. And these clinical trials are done from 1 month to 6 months follow-up, that's all. So long-term follow-ups are not done in these, in these studies. These limitations restrict the data collection, and also generally exactly opposite happens in the real clinical setting. Majority of the majorly moderate to severe diseases requires this treatment, and critically ill patients need the drugs most. So when that is the case, our evaluation usually happens in the mild to moderate cases, then it will not have a representative for the patients on whom we would definitely want to do the treatment. Marketing stage is not the end of the drug development. Actually, it is the starting, it's the beginning of the evidence collection in the product lifecycle. Next 5 to 10 years in market will decide how the product can survive in the market, or it may be banned. So there are higher chances to detect the rare adverse events to these drugs when the drug is in the market, and varied ethnic groups will start using these drugs the moment it is there in the market, and then the adverse events may start surfacing. So now let us get into some of the definitions used in this pharmacovigilance. So what is, so you have already heard about ADR. So what is this ADR? ADR is according to WHO, any response to a drug which is noxious, unintended, occurs at doses normally used in man for the prophylaxis, diagnosis, or therapy of the disease, or for the modification of physiological conditions. So please note that any noxious and unintended, it should not be the intended, intended, if we are treating for a particular disease, and if the same symptoms are appearing, so that is not the one. But if we are if an event is noxious and unintended event occurs in normal doses, it should not be a toxic dose. Okay, if it occurs in normal doses used for treatment or prophylaxis or diagnosis or modification of a physical condition. If it occurs in a higher dose, then it is called as a toxic effect, not an adverse event. So Please note that the adverse event should occur only in the therapeutic doses. What is adverse event? Okay, so actually, like, there are two terminologies which are very closer. You can see adverse drug reaction (ADR) and another one is AE. So we discussed about the ADR. Now let us get into adverse event. It means any untoward medical occurrence that may present during treatment with a pharmaceutical product, but which does not necessarily have a causal relationship with this treatment. If you see adverse drug reaction, it is in relation to the drug use, but in adverse event, it did not have any relationship with the drug, but after the use, okay, after the use of the drug, if something happens, then it is considered as an adverse event. Here you can see that, okay, so suppose a patient is, taking an antihistaminic like chloramphenicol maleate, as well as for the purpose of treating a common cold or any any nasal discharge or anything. If the patient takes this chloramphenicol, then patient will suffer from sedative effect. If the patient takes the drug for common cold and start driving, then like there are operating machine. In such cases, patient may experience road accident or any fall from the roof or any other like hand injury while operating the machine. So such kind of things can happen. So if it happens after the intake of the drug, it is because, as the drug is causing sedative effect and it reduces the motor action, and because of that there is an adverse event. So it is not exactly due to the drug, but it is because of the side effect of the drug, and the person is entering into a new event. So that's why it is considered as an adverse event. So yeah, I would like to ask you, like, divorce can be an adverse event. So yes, the divorce can also be an adverse event if the husband is taking a medicine and it is influencing the, like, reducing the penile erection, and which is leading to the impotence. Then if the wife goes to the court and take divorce, then like, divorce is also an adverse event due to the particular which is considered to be after taking the drug. So this is how we can evaluate the adverse event. Hello, can you see? So now let me get into the next slide. So when we are going to make pharmacovigilance, like, when are we going to make the pharmacovigilance reports and submit to the regulators? Actually, pharmacovigilance reports are prepared both in the post-marketing phase and also in the pre-marketing phase. Okay, so there are various tools are available for submitting to regulatory agencies. First one is ICSR. ICSR, it means that the individual case report. So then the PSUR, that is the periodic safety update report. Generally, periodic safety update report is given in the post-marketing phase. The next one is PBRER, periodic benefit risk evaluation report. Generally, while developing the product, these reports are prepared on the development stages and then submitted to the regulatory for getting into the next stage of the evaluation. DSQR is the developmental safety update report. Here, when the clinical trials are going on, there is something called as drug safety monitoring board. So to submit to drug safety monitoring board and also to the regulators, developmental safety update reports are given, and the findings of these will be incorporated into the product brochure, and it will be handed over to the investigators for their, as a method of giving the updates to the investigator about the product. It gives the complete details of the current status of the drug. Now let us get into the individual case report, case study reports. These are the most important form of the report, what we are most importantly concerned, especially when we are dealing with the clinicians and population and everyone. So an adverse event report of an individual patient acts as the source data in the pharmacovigilance. See, whenever we make any kind of report related to pharmacovigilance, these individual case study reports are very important, and whatever we are going to generate today, they will be the individual case study reports. It is collected using the standardized uniform form. The main focus of the ICSRs are reports from healthcare providers and patients in member countries of the WHO program. So all the case reports are updated into the WHO global database that is called as VG base. It is developed and maintained by the WHO by the Uppsala Monitoring Center, Sweden. So all the individual case reports, they will get into this VG base or the WHO database, and then that will act as the base for analysis and issuing all kind of reports, or even signal detection or banning of the drug or anything and everything comes under this. So what are the four important elements required to prepare the valid ICSR? So here you can see that identifiable patient should be there, identifiable reporters should be there, and then suspected drug, like the causative agent, that is the suspective drug should be there, and an adverse event should be there. So I will repeat, identifiable patient should be there, identifiable report should be there, and suspected drug should be there, and an adverse event should be there too, which describes about the event. So all these, if you have these four elements, you should be able to easily report. So if you may be thinking that, see, I don't have all the information what to do, whether I can report or not. See, here you have, if you have these four important things like the patient name, identifiable report, that is the doctor or the customer or anyone, healthcare system person, and then suspected drug, name of the drug is there, and an adverse event, what happened. Exactly. So if you have all these four things, you can easily go ahead reporting the adverse event. So now let us get into the next slide. So why ADR reporting is important? If you go through the literature, you will understand that ADRs are among the top leading causes of death in many countries. Okay, so this is the report given by the WHO. So ADRs account for more than 5% of the hospital admissions in India. So there is a link already given. You can go there and you will also find all these facts. ADRs constitute a significant economic burden on the patients and the government also. So most if you get an adverse event, then you will get admitted, and suppose if you are staying 4 days, 5 days, I'm sure almost 20,000-30,000 will get you will have to pay to the hospital. So this is this is just one estimation or a kind of example. So if an admissions are there, so there is a significant economic burden on the patient and the government also. Most importantly, these areas are preventable by avoiding risky drugs. These are just a preventable events. All drugs are not risky to all the patients. Sometimes some patients somewhere they will get affected. Pharmacovigilance helps us to identify who cannot tolerate the drug, which drug cannot be tolerated, and if you document and report it, helps us to issue the safety signals to the doctors and also prevent the potential adverse event. So what are the benefits of adverse drug reaction reporting? So pharmacovigilance helps us to assess the safety of drug therapies, especially recently approved drugs. Pharmacovigilance provides updated drug safety information to healthcare professionals and other stakeholders. Pharmacovigilance assists in measuring the economic impacts of the adverse drug reaction prevention as manifested through reduced hospitalization, optimal and economic drug use, and also minimize the organizational liability. Suppose if a patient develops an adverse event, they go to the court, then there will be a lot of court cases, and also there will be litigations, and the company may have to pay a lot of compensations also. So all these things can be reduced by going through the pharmacovigilance process, and so that's the benefit. So the next benefit, what are the other benefits? Generally, once the pharmacovigilance continues, then there will be a lot of regulatory actions are expected to start. Some of the regulatory actions on the basis of ADR reports to ensure patient safety are upgrading of the package insert. If you see, whenever you buy a product, there will be a small chit inside. Okay, if you open that paper and see, you will see the small letters. You will see a lot of information given there, and all the doctors are supposed to have knowledge about what is written in that. And if you go to the international, like especially UK and USA, they are maintaining a website, separate website, which gives you all the products approved in their country, and even brand names, everything is written, and the product details also, like we call it as the product inserts. Okay, product inserts, they are also released publicly for viewing. So as doctor, you should know what is written, and whenever the new event or new kind of event is recorded, and that information will get into this small sheet. Okay, so this paper. So then marketing authorization, sometimes it may be all the adverse events, they may impact the marketing authorization of the product also. And if it is serious and life-threatening, definitely there is a chance that, like terfenadine, nimesulide, and other products, so the product may go out of the market. And sometimes if any particular batch is under scrutiny, then that batch recall may happen, and that they will be removed from the market. So changes in the classification of the drug is also possible. As you know, paracetamol is considered as the over-the-counter medication in India. And I was working on a case. I saw that like some of the authors, they have recommended that in India paracetamol is consumed exorbitantly, and which is resulting, causing the liver damage, especially in children, and which is leading to a lot of damages in children and the elderly people. So they are arguing to remove the over-the-counter status and bring it back into the prescription medicine. Okay, like this, regulators can impose restrictions on availability and use of the drug. Status of the drug may change from OTC to non-OTC. They may put restrictions to be prescribed by the specialists like endocrinologists, nephrologists, like that. So only those specialists need to prescribe, and they have to put their KMC number to be used in a special conditions. They may also restrict a particular disease also. Especially like now antibiotics are getting into that mode. So what are the reporting procedures? Now let us get into the method of reporting. So who can report the adverse events? Like anyone can report the adverse events, including clinicians, dentists, pharmacists, nurses, physicians, physiotherapists, like healthcare professionals, and non-healthcare professionals also, like consumers, patients, or manufacturers. Anyone else, they can also report these adverse events. What to report? So what to report? What should we report? Here you can report all types of suspected adverse reactions, whether it is a known. Like majority of my friends, whenever we speak to the clinicians, they ask, "Sir, we know all these adverse events already exist. Why should I report?" So even if it is known, you are supposed to report, and if it is unknown, definitely you are supposed to report. And why we should report the known? Because whatever the percentage, the frequency of the event, if it is 5% today, if it gets into 10%, then it gets into the radar. Okay, so for getting that, we need to keep on accumulating the data and then identify the safety signals, and new safety signals can be issued based on these known adverse events. And again, whether it is serious, non-serious, whether it is serious, non-serious, that kind of adverse events should be reported, and whether they frequently or rare adverse events, everything you need to report. Okay, so irrespective of whether it is reactions from all types of pharmaceutical products, including allopathy, Ayurvedic, vaccines, medical devices, as I already mentioned, everything should be reported. So how to report and whom to report? As you see that there is a form which I am going to discuss. It is called as suspected adverse drug reaction reporting form, or medicinal side effects reporting form. So these forms are available in the websites of the regulators, that is the IPC websites are there. So you can go and report there. Suppose if you have any problem with finding, you can search in the Google, you will be able to find it. And what do I do after writing? You can actually if your center is already approved as the adverse event monitoring center, then you can report within your hospital. If it is not approved, then no need to worry, you can go and report to the nearest one. So our center, CD-CIMER, is approved as the Adverse Drug Reaction Monitoring Center. So if you are not finding a suitable, near area monitoring center, you can report to us. Our email ID is amc.cdcimer@dsu.edu.in. So is it that only you have to report to us? You don't need to report to us. You can report to even to the PVPI directly, right, with the email IDs pvpi@ipcindia.net or pvpi@ipcindia@gmail.com. So like this, you can report at your convenience and happiness. So next one is, so as a reporter, you may want to know what will happen to all these reports, like why should I report? So once you submit the report, this will get into a database called as VigiFlow. Okay, so this VigiFlow is generally given to all the member countries by the WHO, and this WHO, they have since India is the one of the member, and we are a recognized center, so they directly give us the access to this database, and we enter all the data what we collected into the WHO directly, WHO database directly, and the IPC will have an eye on us what we are really reporting. They will keep on checking what is coming in, what is going out, and they will have a we will have to report to the IPC, and then they will check all the documents. If it is okay, then they will allow to get into the database. So suppose, sir, I don't have the form, what will I do? So you can very well call to the toll-free number 1-800-180-3024. So in this number, if you call, so from Monday to Friday, 9 to 5:30 p.m., you can call at any time, and there is a space. There is a place given to, there is an opportunity given for the public to go ahead and reporting. And our Indian government is so proactive. You can see there is an Android application is also available. So ADR PVPI. So you can go to Google Play Store, and then you can collect that application and install into your mobile, and you can very well report also. So is it happening only in India? So no, worldwide the forms are available, like in USA, UK, everywhere, like SIOMS and MedWatch forms are available. And these forms can be like, actually like the way we have designed our form, they have also designed, and basically like all the components are almost same. So there is nothing major, like changes are there. So we are in par with the international methods what we are adopting. So in that way, we don't need to worry. So all these forms, they are like SIOM form or MedWatch forms. Like if you go to any other countries, you will be having these forms to fill, and then you will be filling the data, giving the data to them. So these are the ADR forms available in India. You can see that suspected adverse drug reaction monitoring form, that is a red form, which is available for the healthcare providers, and there is a blue form, that is the medicinal side effects reporting form, that is for the consumers and the patients if they want to report. And there is one more form for the COVID-19 patients, that is the ADR reporting form for COVID-19 drugs. And the blue form, that is the medicinal side effects report form, it is available in local languages also. You can see Kannada version is also available, and if the person don't know how to read English, they can very well access the language specific form, and then they can report also. So this is the form which we are going to go through now. So this is the I will get into the details of these the components of each form, and with a case scenario very soon. So why do we need a form? Like, as you know that like each one of us are having our own way of writing, documenting, all those things. So that is not going to give a uniform method of completing the form. So that will again lead to the lot of chaos, and now we are not able to standardize the data collected. That's why the data collection form is properly designed. And also recently, I think yesterday I got to know that one more version is going to come. So I saw the contents. I think there is no much differences are there. Only few here and there small changes are there. But still, we are only practicing this since it is a very recent development. I am going to teach you only about the form 1.3 version. Okay, so this form, and this form will have the color coding also. You can see there is a red color is there, so it's easy to identify, and logo of the regulators is also there. It gives the authenticity, and various places are given, and it is easy. Like if you see, easy tick formats are also available, so that you can easily complete the form, and it is easy to read also. User friendly form is there. So these are the some of the advantages of this form. So now let us try to, I think I already told about this. Now let us get into the next thing, like suspected adverse drug reaction reporting form for the HCPs. That's what we are going to discuss now. Like whenever you want to report, as I already mentioned, you require 4 important sections. That is the, like this form is having 4 important sections. That is the patient information, suspected adverse drug reaction related information, and suspected medication related information, and the reported details. So there are 4 sections are available in this form, and it contains patient information, and then suspected adverse drug reaction, reaction related information, suspected medication related information, and reported details. So these are the. Now I would like to go through a case. All of you please note down carefully, like what I am going to say now. So all of you please note down, so that during this presentation, like when I am reading, so you can start filling, or I will give you another 2 to 3 minutes or 5 minutes. Once you are ready, we'll get into the case directly. So introduction. So a male patient by name ANT of 21 years age, 60 kg weight, who received anti-snake venom serum and experienced drug-induced hypersensitivity reaction and reported to have itching and rashes. Okay, so a male patient by name ANT of 21 years age, 60 kg weight, who received anti-snake venom and experienced drug-induced hypersensitivity reaction and reported to have itching and rashes. So this is the presenting complaint. When we saw the medical history, patient had snake bite and treated with anti-snake venom serum on 9th July 2021. Immediately after initiation of anti-snake venom serum, he developed drug-induced hypersensitivity reactions with symptoms such as itching and rashes. Okay, so let me repeat. Patient had snake bite and treated with anti-snake venom serum on 9th July 2021. Immediately after initiation of anti-snake venom serum, he developed drug-induced hypersensitivity reaction and with symptoms and rashes, itching and rashes. So now let us get into the next stage, that is the product details. Indication of anti-snake venom. What is the indication? It was snake bite, and therapy was begun on 9th July 2021 at 9 p.m. Okay, so patient was given anti-snake venom at 9 July 2021, 9 p.m. Once the reaction was noted at 9, so after initiating the anti-snake venom at 9 o'clock, the reaction is noted at 9:30 p.m. Okay, on 9th July 2021. Immediately after noting the reaction, injection hydrocortisone and injection Avil was given. Okay, so injection hydrocortisone and injection Avil was given. Reaction stopped at 10 p.m. 10 p.m. Okay, so reaction immediately stopped at 10 p.m. On 9th July 2021. Anti-snake venom serum infusion was discontinued immediately at 9:30, and treatment was given, that is the injection hydrocortisone and injection Avil was given. After that, reaction stopped at 10:10, and then anti-snake snake venom infusion again restarted. Okay, after the remedial treatment, and then continued. The dose was not changed. Okay, whatever the dose that was intended, they were intended to give 10 vials. But initially, after giving first vial, they received the itching and rashes. Immediately stopped, and they gave the hydrocortisone and Avil. And after that, again they restarted. And after, under the influence of the hydrocortisone and injection Avil, the reaction did not reappear. Okay, so dose regimen was 10 vials, completed all the 10 vials. All doses were completed. and frequency of administration is 10 vials were given only once. So concomitant medication treatment, so no other concomitant medication information is given by the physician. Outcome, the patient recovered from the events, whatever the rashes and itching was there, so the patient recovered completely. Causality assessment, the reporter suspected that the adverse events were probably or likely related to the suspected suspected drug as per the WHO scale. Additional information, lab test reports, probable prothrombin time 18.7 seconds and INR is 1.34. No additional information is available. Hope all of you have noted now. So concomitant therapy nil, and outcome, the patient recovered from the event completely. Causality assessment, the reporter suspected that adverse events were probably or likely related to the suspected drug. Additional information, lab reports contain prothrombin time 18.7 seconds, 18.7 seconds, INR, that is the is 1.34 seconds. No additional information is available. So now you can complete the form, and after that I will get into the form components of the form, and I will discuss about the how to fill, whether you have filled properly or not. Okay. Now let us get into the form. Here, so there are 4 sections, as I already mentioned. That is a patient information. Patient name is ANT. So actually we require only initials because of the confidentiality. We don't want complete name of the patient. Okay. So then age at the time of the event or the date of birth can be written. That is 21 years. Okay. Then patient is a male. Okay. You have to pick it, and then weight is 60 kg. Okay. So this is the first section. The next is suspected adverse drug reaction section. Here you can see that the event started at what time and date. Here you can see 9 July 2021 is the date, and at 9:30 p.m. Okay. Then event reaction stop time and date, here 9 July 2021, and it is 10:10 p.m. Okay. So it's almost 40 minutes after that the event is completely stopped. Then what is the onset lag time? It means the after giving the drug. You can see the history. The treatment was given, initiated at 9 p.m. and it appeared, the event, that is the rashes and itching, they appeared at 9:30. So there is a 30 minutes lag time after the initiation of the treatment. Okay, so that is the lag time. Okay, now you understood what to write there. Then patient, like you need to describe a bit about the event. Okay, so that is the patient received anti-snake venom. Okay, that's what you patient history note, right? Patient received anti-snake venom and experienced drug-induced hypersensitivity reaction and reported to have itching and rashes. Therapy began on 9 July 2021 at 9 p.m. Once the reaction was noted at 9:30 p.m. Okay, so 9:30 p.m. on 09 July 2021, the injection hydrocortisone and injection Avil was given. Okay, reaction stopped at 10:10 p.m. on 9 July 2021. Okay, so then anti-snake venom. Okay, so then anti-snake venom again restarted, continued under the influence of remedial treatment. So this is about the description of the event. Okay, next comes is the C section, that is the suspected medication. So you need to give more details about the event. Okay, so that's the suspected medication. What medication was used and what is the task? That is the medication is anti-snake venom. Okay, so it is the serum, anti-snake venom serum. It is the name of the product. Okay, so sometimes brand name is there. In that case, in bracket you should be able to write the generic name. Okay, so you should write the generic name most importantly, and the brand name, if available, you can write. And then manufacturer details need to be given. Who is the manufacturer? Like you can see, B dash 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 Serum and Vaccine Institute. Okay, so that is given, and the batch number. Okay, so here I have given arbitrary batch number, but you actually you will have to check when you check the vial, there is a manufacturing date and manufacturing batch and manufacturing expiry date will be there, and also there will be batch number will be there. So that needs to be written, and then expiry date, so whatever it is there, it should be identified. Generally, they give the month and year. Okay, so that only need to be written. So what was the dose they decided? So 10 vials they decided. So 10 vials I have written there. Then route of administration, say intravenous method they have given. Okay, injection intravenously they have given. Then frequency, like only once. Okay, they have decided that whole dose 10 vials will be given as one dose. Okay, so they have given once only. Okay, then therapy start date, that is in 9 July 2021, and the stop date is 9 July 2021. So what is the indication, for what purpose they have given, that is the snake bite, and probably causality assessment, I will come back to that. Okay, I will come back to that, discuss in detail, and then we will decide on that. Okay, so next is action taken. So what was the action taken by the doctor? So did they withdraw the medication? Did they stop the medication? No. Here what they did, they stopped the infusion for some time. They gave the remedial treatment, that is the hydrocortisone and Avial, and they restarted it. Okay, because there is no other go, they have to give antivenom, otherwise the patient will die. So that's why they have given the complete dose of 10 vials. So dose is not reduced. Okay, they did not change the dose also. So they just gone ahead and under the provision of the remedial treatment. So whether the reaction reappear after the reinfusion, here it is no. Actually, usually re-challenge, we call it as the re-challenge of the drug. Suppose some other drug is there, like suppose penicillin is there. So if I give one dose of penicillin, if the reaction reappears, I am sure in my lifetime I will advise the patient not to take the penicillin in his lifetime. Okay, so in that case, reappear, let's say re-challenge is not at all possible. But sometimes, like drugs like this antivenom, under the influence, they have tried because they want to save the patient's life. So after re-challenge, whether it appears or not, here as per our observation, it did not appear, but we know that it is done under the influence of another drug. Okay, that is the hydrocortisone and chlorpheniramine galeate. So under the influence of this drug, so they did not reappear. So it's not the exact way of conducting the re-challenge test, but here it is been done like this, so we have written that. Next is concomitant medications. What are the concomitant medications used? There are two concomitant medications for use, that is for the purpose of treating the reaction, that is the injection hydrocortisone 100 milligram IV SOS, means it is only given once like as per the requirement. What is the date and time? It is written. What is the reason? Hypersensitivity reaction. Injection pheniramine 25 milligram IV was given once, that is as per the requirement, immediate requirement. So they are given 9/7/2021, again same thing. So this is about the completion of the this portion of that is the suspected medication details. Then comes is the additional details. Actually, this section is mainly for the purpose of like top three rows. They are mainly for the purpose of the our AMC. Okay, first row is for yourself. To give the patient details like identification. We need to identify the patient with their case record form. Okay, whether it is OPD number or IP number, we need to identify. And the AMC report and worldwide unique number, that will be only available with the adverse drug reaction monitoring center. When we upload the case, we will get that number and we will write, and it is mainly for the AMC purpose. So these two sections, that is the second row and third row, is mainly for the purpose of adverse drug reaction monitoring center. First row needs to be filled by you, whatever the case number or OPD number you need to write. Next is the 12th question, that is the relevant tests or laboratory data. So there was a history given there in the case, that is the prothrombin time 18.7. seconds and INR is 1.34. Okay, so these are the results are there. So we just have to write there. Any other medical history, allergies or race, pregnancy or more smoking, all these things are there. So there is no other information is available. Next is reporter's details. So additional information is not available, but the reporter's details you have to write who is the doctor, who is writing this form. So your name you need to write, whichever your affiliation, your address needs to be written, so that nobody will trouble you. So please be assured that someone will come and attack me or something like nothing like that. It will be it will directly get it's a confidential report. It will get into the database and it will go only to the WHO and the regulators, and they will and you will be protected. In fact, actually, because if any adverse events are reported, then it's a legally valid document that you have uploaded and it is reported, and it's the innate property or then causality assessment, everything, so that you can protect yourself also. So this is one way you can protect yourself. And PIN number you can write, email ID, telephone number, and whatever is designation, signature. And then once ADR is reported by the pharmacology department or by the ADR monitoring center, so they will sign and give you a copy for your records. So this is about the some of these sections. Other important sections are like relevant tests and laboratory data related section. There is a prothrombin in time 18.7 that we have already written in another section. Same thing you can write here also. Relevant medical history also, like you can say that there is no other that we have already written. Then seriousness, assessment of the seriousness. Is it a serious event or not? Yes, it is a serious event. If you not have actually, what is the meaning of serious adverse drug reaction? There are 6 conditions that are mentioned. Suppose if the event, if it is not treated, is about to cause death or it has already caused the death. Okay, so then it is considered as a serious adverse event. And if the patient is not yet hospitalized and due to the event, if the patient is expected to get admitted, then hospitalization required. In that case, it's a serious adverse event. And if the patient is already inside the hospital, then suppose he is supposed to stay for 5 days and his stay due to the adverse event has extended to 7 days or 10 days or even months, then it's a prolongation of the adverse event. Even 1 day extra also is considered it's a serious adverse event. Or if any other stress conditions which is about to considered as the very important case, or it's a serious life-threatening case, in those cases again we can consider. Or if a person, pregnant mother is taking the drug and after the delivery it is found that the baby born is having the congenital anomaly, in that case it is considered as a serious adverse event. And also you require a immediate intervention or to prevent the permanent impairment or death or disability. In those cases it is considered as another serious adverse event. And if it is already crossed the disability, as a cognitive, in forensic medicine they call it as a grievous injury. So in those cases, if it has caused the disability, in those cases also it is considered as a serious adverse event. Then you will have to assess the outcome, what happened to the adverse event, whether the patient has recovered. So in our case, the patient has recovered, so you may have to fill. If it has not recovered, you can write not recovered. If a patient died fatal, then recovered. So recovering, still about to recover, so that also you can say recovered with sequel. Suppose the patient has recovered with some kind of disfiguration or anomaly or resulting into some like disability or something like that, then it is considered. That also you can tick accordingly. So this is about the form. Hope all of you are comfortable now in filling. I'm sure it will not take more than 5 minutes. Okay. So now let me get into the causality assessment. This is another important stage of my discussion. So what is this causality assessment? It is defined as an evaluation of likelihood that a medicine was a causative agent of the observed adverse drug reaction, okay, or adverse event. So if we are relating the adverse event to this particular, to this particular, drug, then it is considered as we need to assess whether the drug is related or not related or any various stages are there. So we'll try to understand how this causality relationship to the adverse relationship to the particular drug Now, how to establish that? There are two methods are there. There are two methods are considered for analyzing this. So here you can see that there is a one is Naranjo scale. Okay, this is a Naranjo scale of causality assessment. It is having 10 points. Okay, so you can see here are there previous conclusive reports on this reaction. There are this kind of like so now you can start looking into it, this. So whether your event is there any previous conclusive report on this reaction? I'm sure like anti-snake venom is previously also caused, so +1 will be there. Okay, so you can assess the +1. Then did the adverse event appear after the suspected suspected drug was administered? So once the after administration only the event has happened. Okay, within a 30 minutes. So definitely +2 will come to this. Then did the adverse drug reaction improve when the drug was discontinued or specific antagonist was administered? Yes, this also you stopped and also antagonist was given and finally it got discontinued. The event got discontinued. Fourth one is, did the adverse event appear when the drug was re-administered? In this case, it did not reappear, but actually we do not know because we have given a remedial treatment. Okay, so since we have given the remedial treatment, I would like to consider at the level of do not know, because if you have given the remedial treatment and again we are assessing that it is did not appear, it may be wrong. That's why I don't know. So without the influence of, I would like to see without the influence of the drug whether any other issues will come or not. Okay, then only I can confirm. Are there alternative causes other than the drug that could on their own have caused the reaction? I think we don't see any other thing in this. It's a very clear, so that's why we can say no. So that's why +2 will come for this. Then did the reaction reappear when the placebo was given? So here we cannot assess this because in this condition placebo was not given, so we cannot assess. So we don't know will come here. Was the drug detected in blood or other fluids in concentration known to toxic? So we have not estimated, so again 0 will come here. Was the reaction more severe when the dose was increased or less severe when the dose was decreased? It's not a research, it's a treatment of the patient, so we have not evaluated this. Again, not know. Did the patient have similar reaction to the same or similar drugs in any previous exposure? We don't know basically in this case, so that's why again here also 0 will come. Was the adverse event confirmed by any objective evidence? Yes, we have seen patients reported, we saw the reactions were there, so that's why we can consider that it is a observed one. So now let us see. So what happened? So now you can see that we have observed these things as I noted down. All of you have noted down. So the +1, that is the marks +1, +2, that is 3, 4, and then 5, 6, and 7. So totally 7 score is obtained for this. So this is it is coming under the probability. Okay, so if less than 0, like 0 or less than that, then it is doubtful. Possible 1 to 4 score. Okay, so probable it is 5 to 8. So the score is 7 for this case. That's why it is coming under the probable or under the Naranjo scale. Okay, so under the Naranjo scale, it's not definitely a case because we don't know. Okay, so many things, and also there are lacunae in this report in this Naranjo scale also. You can see here that there are, so in most of it, not only in this case, many times we will not be able to evaluate, like re-administration sometimes it is not possible. Just the reaction like placebo, no, I think it's completely unethical. So nobody will use just a placebo to test whether the reaction will appear or not. And then detect was the drug was detected. I don't think like many labs are having the methods to estimate the drug concentration. Again, it's cumbersome and it is not practically possible. Was the reaction more severe when the dose was increased or less when it is decreased? Again, this test is also completely not possible. And then did the patient have a similar reaction to the same or similar drugs in any previous exposure? And most probably patient will not be able to give this history. So considering all these, I think let's say Naranjo scale is a little bit difficult one and difficult to practice. But that's why we have WHO causality assessment scale. Here, I would like to go one by one. You can see here, so the lowest score is unaccessible or unclassifiable. Okay. Here, a report suggesting an adverse drug reaction. So there is an adverse drug reaction, adverse event is there. Okay. Cannot be judged because information is insufficient or contradictory. Actually, we have sufficient information, so this part is not applicable. Data cannot be supplemented or verified. So I think this is not the case for this our case. So now let us get into the next one, that is the conditional or unclassifiable. Okay. So here you can see event or laboratory test abnormal. Yes, there is an event is there. More data for proper assessment needed. No, we have sufficient data is available. Additional data under examination. So nothing like that. We are not waiting for any additional data. So that is also not applicable. Now, unlikely event or laboratory abnormality with the time to drug intake that makes the relationship implausible. But here we have a after giving the drug, the event has appeared. So this statement is wrong. So we will get into the next curve. That is the result. So next condition, next level is possible. Event or laboratory test abnormality with reasonable time relationship to the drug. Yes, this is applicable. Like the event appeared after giving the drug could also be explained by the disease or other drugs. So this is not correct, right? No. So we know exactly, like disease itself will not produce anti-snake venom and all. Like a snake bite, I don't think it will cause all over the body itching or rashes or anything like that. So in that case, I think it is not it's not the correct one. So now let us get into the next level of assessment, that is the probable or likely. Here, event or laboratory test abnormality with reasonable time relationship. Yes, it is correct. Unlikely to be attributed to disease or other drugs. Definitely, it is not related to the disease or any other drugs. Response to withdrawal clinically reasonable. The moment you stop and give the remedial treatment, it is reduced. Re-challenge not required. So we did not do the re-challenge. Okay, so I'm sure this is the thing, like probable is the most probable answer for our case. But just for the completion before concluding, let us understand whether the certain. Okay, so basically same information is there in the certain case. Only thing is here re-challenge is satisfactory. Okay, here in our case actually re-challenge was not so satisfactory. Okay, re-challenge was not so satisfactory because re-challenge was done but under the influence of another drug, so we can't conclude. So now we boil down to probable or likely event. Okay, so this is all about the how we do the causality assessment. Now we understood the method. According to the assessment, our event is probable or likely in both the cases. Even Naranjo scale also assess the same thing. WHO scale also assess the same thing. So in that way, both scales are concurrent, but this method was WHO is much more easier and better way of doing the assessment. So if any other information, additional information is available, you can write so that it will help in the assessment of the drug. Now I have come to the end of my presentation. That is it. We discussed about the, just to conclude what we have discussed, we discussed about the history of the drug safety, phases of clinical trials, need of pharmacovigilance and limitations of clinical trial and drug development. We all understood that. Types of safety reports, we have tried understanding what is ICSR, DSVR, CSR, or PBR, SUR, like this, various reports are there. So we all try to understand the definitions of this. Then definition of adverse drug reaction and AE was understood. Aims and objectives of the pharmacovigilance and benefits associated with that also we understood. And who can report, how to report, where to report, all these things we understood. And also we discussed the case and the components of ADR. Hope all of you are comfortable with completing the adverse drug reactions. So I would like to thank all of you for patient hearing and also the organizing Dr. Satyanarayan sir and also Dr. Pandari sir for giving me an opportunity. And I also would like to thank my department like Dr. Pratibha Nadi madam and also CDCML management for allowing me to go ahead with the presentation. So thank you very much. Hope this helps you to develop your pharmacovigilance activities and collect more reports. Suppose if you collect any reports you don't know where to report, so you have my email ID here, and also you can note amc.cdcyber@dsu.edu.in. Okay, so this email ID you can very well use for reporting adverse events to our centers. So then we will process them further. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. It was a nice presentation. From this prayer, I would like to thank our chairman, Dr. A.P. Shanmugam, then our vice chairman, Dr. A.P. Saran Kumar, executive director, Dr. Vijayanand, principal, team, and vice president. And I would also like to thank our HOD and associate professor, Dr. Satyanarayana, who stood with us and guided us in doing this program, and inviting the guest speaker, Dr. Shivamurthy Nanjundappa. I would like to thank our guest speaker for today's seminar, Dr. Shivamurthy Nanjundappa, for taking the time from his busy schedule and enlightening us with his knowledge on this media reporting. Webinar was interesting and gave deep insights into the topic, which also revealed some interesting facts about adverse reaction and reporting. I am sure that this precious knowledge that Dr. Shivamurthy Nanjundappa gave us will definitely help our students in their coming future. When they become a practitioners, then they can report this adverse drug reaction very easily. I would also thank our faculty and students who are all present here by paying attention, and also thanking you all for making this session very successful. At the end, I also like to thank for the non-teaching staff of pharmacology department and the IT department who helped us from the beginning till today the success of this session. Thank you. Thank you and all.
Both these scales are there, NHO scale and WHO scale. Okay, whatever is printed go through today itself, don't delay. All the areas, whatever is printed, you record, please go through it with the help of the two scales. It's there and printed in the record book. Thank you, and Shivamurthy. So
thank you very much.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, we'll be later. Okay, thank you.